You're going to be seeing a ton of new tech videos because Shroud of False Death, the mythic unique item that basically broke the PTR for all intents and purposes, and that's why we haven't been able to use it since then and needed to get fixed, has officially been re-implemented into the game. And now the Shroud of False Death doesn't necessarily look like altogether that powerful of an item. It might be hard to understand what's the value of it. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use this example of the Blood Surge Necromancer so that you can see mathematically why this thing is nutty and what you need to understand about it so that you can better implement it and use it on your own build. Because do not be confused. All of a sudden, you're going to start seeing this item on a lot of builds because basically if you can run it, you should run it because it's the largest damage multiplier chess piece in the game for non-niche builds. So if you need to do stuff like Spirit Wave with Blood Arson's Cuirass, you wouldn't use it there. You need that armor for the build to work. But everywhere else, if you can survive without normal stats on your chess piece, you're going to be running this armor. So let's go ahead and talk about it because, again, at face value, it doesn't seem that great. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the stats on the armor itself because those are the least interesting part about it. Shroud of False Death has 4 stats on it. It has all stats, which is just generally good. One of the benefits of all stats is not only does it just consider being your core stat, right? Like I'm a Necromancer, it gives me intelligence, but it'll also give me a ton of willpower and dexterity, which is what you're going to need to be able to hit the rare bonuses on your Paragon board. Especially all the way on your 5th board, it can actually get pretty hard to be able to max out these stats unless you're using glyphs that empower the magic nodes around your glyph socket. Most builds probably won't be able to get here, but this all stats roll basically means you'll be able to fully unlock all the rare node bonuses at the end of your last Paragon board for free without really having to worry about it. Following that up, you're going to see a ridiculous amount of additive damage very specifically on your next attack after you entered stealth. So Shroud of False Death's special ability is that if you don't deal damage for 2 seconds and your mercenaries don't attack anything and your minions don't attack anything and you don't have any channeled damage, etc., you'll gain stealth. And not only will you gain stealth, which just looks kind of cool, but you'll also gain a huge amount of movement speed. Now, in a practical sense, this isn't super important. If you just manage to pick up this item for yourself, if you have like no movement speed on your character, or if you're in a Helltide traveling from one node to another node, etc., it'll probably feel fairly good. One of the major issues is that it doesn't proc in town, so you don't gain a bunch of movement speed while you're like running to the blacksmith and then running over to the stash, etc. I wish you did. I think it would be pretty cool. But this effect, other than maybe activating stealth mechanics on things like the Druid or the Rogue, is basically a nothing stat. You can't reliably proc the additive damage from this in a meaningful way. I really wouldn't worry about that. And then the last stat is actually pretty strong, and that's resource generation. Nowadays, you can only use this as a temper on your rings and amulet, as well as very specific unique items in the game having it as an option. But most instances of resource generation were actually removed from the game. So it being a niche stat that's typically very powerful on a lot of different builds, most notably something like Soul Rift Necromancer that wants to generate a ton of resource every single second, it's a very, very good stat. But that's not really why you equip this armor. It's actually fairly hard to equip this armor because not being able to run a legendary chess piece that has maximum life, intelligence, all resistance, armor, total armor, as well as really powerful utility tempers is a hard bargain to make. That's where the +1 to all passive skill comes into play. That's the implicit at the top there just underneath the armor. If you haven't gone and looked, you have a lot of passives in your skill tree. And just for people who are newer to the game or don't necessarily know the differentiation between them, let's just talk about what a passive is. Any skill that is in a square is going to be some type of skill you can put on your bar, an active skill. These are not passive. Similarly, the different enhancements to them, which are these little diamond shapes, or these modifiers to them, are also not passives. You're not unlocking both versions of a skill just because we have this +1 to the round circle skills. These are your actual passives. You'll notice that I do not have any points in this, and it's still grayed out, but it counts as having a single rank in it. This one right here is increasing my maximum essence by 3. You'll see instead of having 100, I have 103. Okay, cool. This is the first bit that you need to understand about the armor. Shroud of False Death will add skill ranks to skills, and even if you don't have them, you now benefit from them. That's where the raw strength of this comes from. So you'll notice that there are a ton of passives I haven't personally picked up. One of the easiest ones to kind of grok right now would be Spiked Armor. Spiked Armor is going to grant me 40 thorns, which isn't super important, but 5% additional armor. And when you're trying to cap your armor up to 1,000 in Torment 4, basically what this says is that I only need 952 armor to be able to reach cap, because that 5% bonus would bring me up to 1,000. So even just right here, a single skill point in something I normally don't want to waste any of my skill points into, because those are a pretty choice commodity when it comes to character power, is going to alleviate some of the minor issues that you might have with gearing. And the more passives that you have on your tree, the stronger this becomes. And while I could go on and on about slightly increasing my chance to generate a corpse versus a boss, and how that very slightly mathematically changes the outcome from one character build to another character build, and how that allows me to optimize, that's probably not really what you're worrying about right now. You're worrying about damage. Because what does +1 passive really mean for any individual character? Well, again, let's go ahead and use a Blood Surge Necromancer as a quick example. I'm just going to point out all of the different nodes here that directly increase my damage. First one would be Imperfectly Balanced. This is a huge multiplier for core damage. Titan's Fall is a huge multiplier if I'm successfully fortified. Death's Embrace is not only going to give me more survivability, but also grant me additional damage to close targets. Amplify Damage says I do more damage if I have successfully applied a curse to a target. Tides of Blood gets me a huge damage multiplier for overpower. Coalesce Blood gets me a huge damage multiplier for base blood skills as a start. Memento Mori increases my Book of the Dead sacrifices that get me overpower damage multiplier. Inspiring Leader gets me more crit chance, and while that doesn't directly increase my damage, it makes it easier to be able to hit these requirements to hit 100%. And then you'll notice that there are a ton of other passives that are in my skill tree that I didn't go over. While they're not directly increasing my damage output, they will all supplement my builds in different way. And because it's me, you know I had to go and make a data sheet. Now I'll include a link to this in the description down below just in case you wanted to read through it, as well as maybe just add on to it a little bit more for your individual build, and then you'll just be able to very easily do these own calculations yourself. But again, I just wanted to show you mathematically what it looks like. And we're going to use the example of that Imperfectly Balanced node. Imperfectly Balanced grants me an additional 5% damage per skill rank in it. So I go from getting a 15% damage multiplier to a 20% damage multiplier. So for Imperfectly Balanced, again, I go from a 15% damage multiplier to a 20% damage multiplier. What that basically means is that I used to do 1.15 times my damage, and I do 1.2. To figure out the difference between these two multipliers, basically how much more damage is it, you just take 1 plus your bigger number divided by 1 plus your smaller number. What that comes out to is just straight up a 4% increase in damage. In fact, a 4.35% increase in damage. Now, in an individual 4.35 damage multiplier, it may not seem like a lot. Because what, you go from doing 1 billion damage to 1 billion damage plus 5%, that's obviously not huge, right? But it's when you start to stack up all these damage multipliers that you start to get a very different story. So Imperfectly Balanced represents a 4% damage increase. Titan's Fall represents a 5% damage increase. Fueled by Death is nearly a 3% damage increase. Death's Embrace is a little bit under a 2% damage increase. Amplified Damage is a 3.5% damage increase. Tides of Blood is over a 6% damage increase. Coalesce Blood is over a 5% damage increase. Memento Mori, if you sit down and you do the math of what I very specifically am gaining from it, is over a 5% damage increase. It also represents a huge amount of additional all resistance for me, or for other people using it for crit chance, represents a 3% increase to our critical strike chance in total. Inspiring Leader alone, again, increases our critical strike chance by 4, so False Death right now is 7% critical strike chance for my build. What that basically means is I could take an entire critical strike chance roll off of my gloves. So that means I could either put on up 400 additional maximum life, or a 75% additional critical strike damage, or 100% additional overpower damage, or more attack speed, or more intelligence, etc. And then because I literally don't even have the points to put any in, Finality, whenever I cast my ultimate, I gain a damage multiplier for 8 seconds, represents a total of a 5% damage increase. Now, okay, great. I listed off a whole bunch of numbers at you. And for the people who already know how to do this math, you can kind of do it yourself and figure it out. But quite literally, what's the final product, Mac? How much damage did you get by equipping this armor? The total damage multiplier that I get when I take the product of all of these individual small little damage multiplier bonuses is a whopping 46.7% increase in damage. That's an entire offensive aspect's worth of damage. Right now, Great Feast is only a 44% damage multiplier, and this is one off from being perfect. So Shroud of False Death already equals stronger than one of my biggest damage multipliers on my build, even if it were a perfect greater ancestral version of that aspect. Not only that, I gain a huge amount of additional damage reduction, because it turns out taking a single damage reduction number and increasing it is stronger than just adding on that same increase, but as a new damage reduction number. And the list goes on and on. But one of the things that I want to point out that is, again, not immediately obvious, but is representative of just like kind of the crazy strength of putting a skill rank into something without having to put a skill rank into something. And that's the idea of fortifying completely for free. Now, if you've ever played an overpower build, what you need to understand about it, if you haven't, is that how much bonus you get from your overpower is two different sources. One, how much maximum life you have, and how much fortified status you currently have. The more maximum life, the more fortified status that you can get. All of this goes together in a big additive damage number and then gets multiplied against your damage total. Now, being able to fortify is obviously incredibly important on a blood build that's looking to overpower as often as possible. Typically, you would put multiple points into Drain Vitality here, and you might also put points into Necrotic Carapace. This says a lucky hit chance to be able to fortify whenever your blood skill hits a target, but sadly, Blood Surge has a really, really low lucky hit chance, so this doesn't happen all the time. As opposed to Necrotic Carapace, which just says I have to generate a corpse. And generating the corpse is actually significantly easier than hitting this one lucky hit chance, because that same bonus that I'm getting to every other skill is also increasing the chances of me generating a corpse. Remember when I said I wouldn't get into nitty gritty here because it would be so impossible? No, we are absolutely going on to it because it's kind of insane how powerful this is. So not only do I just get to trigger lucky hit chance from my own blood skills to fortify completely for free, but the actual better system for being able to do this as quickly as possible comes from Hewed Flesh generating corpses based off of lucky hit chance. And then anytime I generate a corpse, I'm automatically fortifying for significantly higher than Drain Vitality. And since I don't have to put any points in here, I'm saving upwards of 4 total points, because I would normally want to put 2 to 3 into Drain Vitality, and then at least 1 into Necrotic Carapace, just to kind of shore up any failures that I might have had from the initial lucky hit chance. So Shroud of False Death, on top of getting me a 46% damage multiplier, as well as getting me a huge amount of damage reduction, as well as getting me a whole bunch of lucky hit chance and movement speed just for free. This just gets me 5% movement speed. This just gets me 5% movement speed. Putting on this armor, even though it doesn't say it, is increasing my movement speed by 10%, something necromancers desperately want. But it's also fully enabling one of the most important systems on a blood necromancer that exists without having to do anything. Now, Shroud of False Death's relative value is going to change based off of what class you're playing and how many passives work for the damage that you're doing. And on top of that, maybe if you're playing something silly like the Spiritborn, where all of your passives look for specific Spirit Hall tags, and you're getting 1 rank into all of them for free. And now all of a sudden, your Centipede, Jaguar, Eagle build now gets all of the passives that work for all of those things, as well as the massive amount of passives at the end that basically just say if you click an ultimate skill, you become a god. I'm not joking. Have you ever gone and looked at the Spiritborn class? They have this entire cluster of various passive skills that all say when you click your ultimate, or if you have an ultimate, or if your ultimate's recently come off cooldown, or if you just, I don't know, you like looking at the ultimate a couple times, you gain an incredible amount of additional bonuses. Maximum life, we're going to get additional damage versus elites, we're just going to have more maximum resource. After you do this, you're going to increase the damage of all your ultimate skills and whatever the thing is doing. I can't even read all these things. You just are unstoppable for a bunch of different seconds. That's insane. Please give that to the Necromancer, etc., etc. So again, the more passives that you have and the more things that they can apply to, the stronger Shroud of False Death becomes. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing ends up on basically every single Spiritborn build. Does this mean that you should immediately go out and craft this armor and put it on? I mean, maybe. Like, honestly, like, maybe the answer is yes. It might just be the new materials. It might just be the thing that everybody puts on because it's just kind of good for everybody. It's basically the Shaco of armors at this point. Is that a good thing? I don't know, man. I didn't really like Shaco, but it was like cool and it was rare and it was hard to get. But if every single build is wearing this armor, we might have an issue, but like, I don't know, I'm not the developers, and luckily I don't get to make that decision in case you're a huge fan of this item. I do hope that this doesn't necessarily mark the trend of Uber Uniques going forward. I don't just want them to be ubiquitously the best item to equip on every single build. I want to be cool and do interesting stuff like Spear of Barbarian, which is like basically like Headhunter from PoE. You know, that cool thing that like gives you pylons and stuff. That's sick. Am I ever going to use it? Probably not. I'm never going to make a class that can actually equip it, but I like that idea. But let me know down in the comments. Is this too good? Is this not good enough? Is it too confusing? Did I do a good job explaining it to you? Do you have any other questions? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. If I just enlightened you, if I just like broke this open why it finally works and you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. You won't want to be missing out on any of this type of information. I have no issue sitting here and making all the data sheets if it means you'll click that button. Similarly, go ahead and leave a like on the video. It helps me out a ton. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and finish shilling for myself. But again, thank you for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.